It's all of those things that allow me to actually get closer and closer to this huge goal that actually scares me.
A 10x reckoning is the moment when you realize there is a choice. Are you going to settle for your current way of operating and the current results you're getting, or are you going to reinvent yourself and go for the real thing? Joy or fun is a ceiling on your ambition. Because if you go, I can't go 10x, or frankly, even 3x or 2x feels a bit much because, it's a bit of a grind already. So if it's a grind now, why would I want a 10x more grind? And if you haven't got the composure to deal with it and keep going, you're probably never going to get to your goal. It happens at every level in the organization. You say it happens when an expert becomes a manager, it happens when a manager decides they want to become an executive. And at each step, it is this 10x reckoning, which is, do I stay in my comfort zone with my current identity, or do I go for the thing which feels a bit impossible for me right now?
There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing it all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. All right, I want you to ask yourself today, are you settling for what's in front of you? What's easy to do, what's demanded, what's expected, kind of getting by, getting through the day, maybe even being really successful, but not feeling so fulfilled. So, are you ready to think differently about it, about the impact you can have on your company, on your team, on your industry, and on your life? Now, before you get skeptical on me, I hope you're just a tiny bit curious. And I'm expecting that some of you are wondering, is this even possible? Well, if you're willing to entertain the idea that it might just be doable, even in your existing context, then stay with us because we think we've got some game-changing perspectives that are going to show you how to think differently about your impact. My guest today is I'm super fan of Richard's work, Richard Medcalf. He describes himself as what you get when you put a McKinsey consultant, a slightly unorthodox pastor, and an entrepreneur in the blender. I think that's an excellent description. He's the founder of X Quadrant, which helps elite leaders reinvent their success formula and multiply their impact. His personal clients are CEOs of billion-dollar companies, successful serial entrepreneurs, and founders of tech unicorns. He's been advising C-suite executives for 25 years, master's at Oxford University, joined a premier consulting company, and later went to Cisco for 11 years on an elite team reporting directly to the CEO. I think that qualifies him to say, how do we increase our impact? I should add, Richard is a binational English-French, lives near Paris with a lovely, charming family. And Richard, welcome to the conversation.
Yeah, hi Wanda, great to be here again and looking forward to jumping in this time. In fact, I will just say that I've upgraded my bio a little bit since you last knew.
Okay.
I now say that I'm what you get if you put all those other things, but instead of an entrepreneur, I now put Freddie Mercury in the blender as well. I think it's a bit more fun and you'll probably know why a little bit if you've read the book.
I do know a little bit about that one. And also, I think I remember, and it says in your bio, that you're a particular fan of the electric guitar. So Freddie Murphy kind of fits right in there with that whole sense as well. All right. Okay, I love the unorthodox nature, though, of whatever we're putting in the blender. I think that gives you a sense as somebody who's going to think differently, and that's what we're here for. So, Richard, I love your former book, Making Time for Strategy, recommended to everybody right, left, and center. Why this book, 10X Reckoning? What is it about that gets you to write this book?
Yeah, the reason... Well, actually, I'll start the other way around. Why did I write Making Time for Strategy, my first book? And it was that I always have a heart for creating this 10X impact and really helping leaders not just stick on the safe incremental path, but really go for what they want, go for the quantum leap that they love to do, but they're not quite sure they're ready for. But when I work with my clients, often they're founders, CEOs, high-level executives, on that, almost the first thing they often would say to me is, Richard, I've got no time. I'd love to do that, but my existing responsibilities are getting in the way. So how could I even think about 10X when I want to, when I'm 1X is taking everything that I've got? So Making Time for Strategy was really like me documenting just some of the tools, tactics, and mindsets to actually start to free up time. So that's the first part. And then why this book? Well, I suppose the 10x Reckoning, it's a very different book really from my first one, as you'd have seen. It's shorter, it's just a 75-page read. I wanted it to be for people who are very time poor, running big organizations or high growth organizations or any kind of business really. And the reason I suppose I wrote it was that I see so many leaders who they know inside them they could play a much bigger game. They know perhaps they could change their industry or even the world. They want to make a difference. They're at the stage possibly where it's not, they're not just playing survival. They don't just need the money to stay off the streets, right? And yet they know, they're thinking, well, do I really dare go for the thing that I really want to do or that I think I could do? Because actually the comfort zone isn't bad. One of my clients said, I can just do what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I'm going to impress everybody, but I'm not going to impress myself because I know this is just what I do. And it's fairly easy for me, to be honest, at this stage. It's taking a lot of effort, but it's not that difficult. I'm in my comfort zone. And so as I started to work with leaders, which really is my mission, right? Helping the world's top leaders become forces for good at a scale they can't even imagine. As I started to work with my clients on this, I realized there were three main reasons that they get stuck. And there's plenty of books about going 10x and strategizing to go 10x. And I didn't need to write another book about that. But what I wanted to talk about was, who do we need to become if we're going to be the kind of leader that actually creates a 10x result? It's not just about strategy. Most leaders think, if I just had a better plan, then it's all going to be good. I just need a better plan. But that plan is still within the same box of their current mindset, their current way of working, their current identity. What the real game changer is when you break through the limitations of who you are being as a leader to operate at the 10x level.
So you're talking about this at the elite leader level. I'm going to take it down a notch for clients I was talking with yesterday who are mid-career people, in the middle of their career, great success, let's say a salesperson running a huge region can kind of keep cranking that machine and feels absolutely totally stuck and says, I don't think I have time to do any more. Okay? Can't imagine themselves in a bigger playing field, in a bigger, doing it differently, shaking it up, challenging it, and just can't imagine it because they're so stuck in the here and now. And I think that is right, left, and center. Not just elite leaders, but many people. You want to react to that?
Absolutely. So what you're talking there is one of the three traps that I see leaders falling into or coming. And you're right, it's not just at the elite level. You don't have to be a CEO or founder to go through what I call the 10x reckoning. So let's just step back. The 10x reckoning is the moment when you realize there is a choice. Are you going to settle for your current way of operating and the current results you're getting and just go a bit hard, work a bit harder, do a bit more, and you're going to kind of plateau and perhaps gradually fade away if you're honest? Or are you going to reinvent yourself and go for the real thing? And there are three traps in that. The first is when you're stuck. And I think that's what you just talked about. You're stuck because you're just stuck in operations. All your existing responsibilities have piled up. You've barely got time to think. You probably need a copy of Making Time for Strategy, but yes. That is what's happening, right? That you're feeling stuck, and actually, some people almost find 10x insulting because they're barely hanging on, delivering the 1x. They go, I can't even think about that right now, Richard. But it's there. Other people are doing it, and you can do it. But right now, you're feeling stuck in operations. The second one is it's when you're playing safe, and this is when you kind of actually life is good. You've actually got to a good level of success, at whatever level, right? That might be, it could be that you've completely exited your business as a founder and you made your millions, or it could be you're mid-level and actually life is okay. You've got flexibility, you go home at a good time, you've got your family, or life is good. And then, but either case, the question then comes like, do I risk going for the next 10x? Is it going to be too much sacrifice? Too much risk? What happens if I fail? What happens if I can't do this? Am I going to screw everything up by going for this bigger, more exciting project? So that's playing safe. And then the last one is when your team is just going slow, so that you've got a big vision and you look around and you realize your team is not tracking to that 10x goal. So you thinking 10x, but my challenge would be you're probably leading at 1x. In other words, there's some difference. Like you're not, whatever it is you're doing with your team, they're not stepping up yet to be the leaders that you need to scale this vision out and deliver on it. So I call that stuck, safe, and slow. And it's my initial diagnostic of like, what's going on? Where's the gap?
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And those resonate with what I see in all of my clients. The I can't do more because I'm stuck. I don't want to screw everything up. I'm being safe and my team can't follow me. I love it. So when you're getting people to start with this 10x reckoning, where do you get them to start? Like what's the first step?
Well, often what I like to do is ask them to consider what their default future is. What happens if nothing changes? Like, what is the future they're actually currently creating? And project that forward a couple of years. And normally it's good. It's a good future. It's not a bad future. My clients, they're high performers. They're good, right? But just project that forward. And then I start to ask them about their preferred future, the future they would love to create, the future that feels a bit impossible for them right now. And then we start to look at, well, what's that gap? And what's holding you back? Like what would it take to get off your current default trajectory, which is your 80% likelihood scenario, to the thing you really want? And sometimes people do have trouble even knowing what that higher bar is. That's normally when they're stuck because they're so stuck in operations they haven't even stepped back to really dream of that. But that's probably where I would start. So. I work with one client. He's an amazing guy. He's a Mexican entrepreneur. He's built a massive business. I think it turns over about 30 million in profit every year. I don't know what revenues are. They're pretty extensive. And he built it from scratch. And he was saying to me that he says all his friends or colleagues say like, you're done, man. You can just retire. And he's like, I don't want to be done. I don't want to be done. I want to go for the next thing, right? But what is the next thing? Do I really know what that thing is? But I can project forward his default future and we can see what that is. And I asked him, how excited does that make you feel? And he's like, 6. I don't let people choose a 7 because 7 is like an on the fence number. So they've got to go for a 6 or an 8, right? It's like, 6. It's like, it's okay. So then we started to talk, well, what would be the components, even if you don't know everything in that preferred future? Well, what would it be? Well, it would have to be at a huge scale. I don't do things by halves. It would have to make social impact. I don't need just more money. I want to really leave a legacy. Okay, great. We can start to dig into that. Start to kind of paint elements of this. But until you start to have this vision forming of what I call it your life's greatest work. Now, that doesn't resonate with everybody, but I think it's a good way to start. Like if I was to create my life's greatest work over the next 5 years, what would that look like? And start to dig into that. So I think that's where I would start, just really understanding these two futures and then getting curious about, well, why aren't you tracking on the 10x goal? And normally it comes out they're stuck and they're perhaps not even imagining it yet, or they haven't got time to even get their thinking clear, or they're playing safe, like they're fearful of going for that. They're not sure they really want it. They kind of want it, but they're also scared of it. Or whether their team is just not being the team they need, and they're not sure, can I really is it always me? Does it always have to be on me? Why is it always me? Why am I always carrying the weight? Why am I feel I'm dragging people? I can't create the vision on my own. Like they've got to come with me. And have I got all the wrong people? But I don't want to sack everybody because they're my team. And if I replace them with new people, are they really going to be any better? And all of that stuff that comes out. So I think at that point we start to diagnose and drop a level down.
All right, so there is a bit of understanding that I am either stuck playing it safe or my team is going slow, that one of those traps I've fallen into. There is imagining what the future kind of looks like, or even what the elements of that future might be, so that you begin to get some glimmers of what would get you excited again, get you off the 6 and into an 8 or a 9. Because why? Life is too short to be a 6 or a 5 or a slide even down further. All right, and now we come to, so let's talk about this, you call it in the book the wobble, That moment when you're afraid that the team can't deliver, and you and I know we get 1,001 justifications for why the team can't deliver. There's too much on their plate, they're not ready, they're not really committed, it's a younger generation. I mean, the list goes on forever and ever and ever. How do you, what are you seeing, and how do you help people get out of that dilemma?
Yeah, so the wobble often shows up when people are stuck, right? When they're doing too much themselves, when they're holding too much of the reins themselves, where they've got the whole control thing going, and they're a little bit unsure, do I want to let go? Or can I let go? Can I delegate? All these things. And they say, I've tried it in the past, and I had to jump back in and pick up the reins. And I say the wobble is that moment when you kind of let go, and then everything starts to shake. And sometimes it collapses, right? Or in the leader's past, definitely, I tried it and it was a nightmare, and I brought this person in, and I trusted them and gave them everything, and then they let me down. I had to fire them, I had to pick up the pieces, and it was a nightmare, and I don't want to do that again. So again, there's different ways behind it, but I think there's a couple of places. So there's some tactical questions, but the first question is really, again, I always say we think it's a tactical and a strategic challenge, but it's always a personal challenge first of all. So, so the first one is, do I really know what the more valuable tasks are for me to be working on? Like, am I really clear? As I said in my first book, right? The most important project is the one no one is asking you for, and it's easier you can't really free yourself from things. You have to free yourself up for more important things. So again, one of my clients, he wants to scale his business from $100 million to $1 billion, really change his sector and make a difference in the world as he does that through a new radical disruption of his industry. And so for him, actually, that big goal is helping him let go of things that previously he didn't let go of, because actually, like, he knows this is where the value is. So I'm going to go for this. So that is part of it. But the other part is really understanding that knee-jerk reaction that we have, that need to be in control, right? So many, when I kind of dig into my clients, they admit to this kind of control freakery tendency. It's the high performer paradox, because high performers, they're great. They're faster than most people. They can see the bigger picture. They think a lot strategically about all the pieces. They can see it. They can probably do anything as well as or better than anybody in their team in many ways, or at least given all the extra knowledge that they have compared with people in that team. And yet that very capability then makes it hard for them to let go, because they prioritize speed. And so it's all about what do we believe? First of all, what do we believe, right? So things like, I believe that if I just do it, it's going to be quicker, all that usual stuff, right? So they're optimizing for speed and not momentum. They're not building the organizational capability. They're just trying to get things done. And so that addiction to speed is one thing they need to be careful about, because on an exponential curve, actually, it's not about speed. It's about trajectory, right? It might go slower to start with, but the foundations you put in place so that suddenly you go for it. So exponential can feel slower than the incremental progress to start with. And I think also, I would say, pragmatically as well, a big part of the wobble is, first of all, understanding what does it mean when things are wobbling, right? And again, you can say you might feel it means it's bad. It means the team are not delivering. Or you can reframe it as, okay, this means the team are learning. This means that actually this is where their feet are held to the fire, and they get to realize this stuff is real, and they have to rise or fall accordingly. And therefore, by keeping them responsible, they're going to navigate through the wobble and learn from it and step up. And those who don't, well, they've probably made their decision about where they are in the business. But the danger is that the ship wobbles, and then the leader comes in and grabs the reins again, and the team have never actually had to go through the consequences of that. I think that's the main thing. The other thing I would say is that there's a real key role here about, I call it the transparency bargain of eyes on, hands off. So, in other words, you can't, often leaders have been so in control, they at some point just delegate and abdicate, and they just say, just deal with it. I trust you, just go and deal with everything. And they kind of walk away. And then they realize later on that the things they thought were being done aren't being done. Things haven't been happening, and they only notice it when the lag indicator, like profit or revenue, starts to go strange. So I think often leaders, again, they can be decisive and fast moving, but if you apply that to that moment of letting go things where you've been the linchpin for many years, that can be a bit dangerous, because if you just walk away, then the person doesn't have the support they need. So again, you can have a whole episode or more on that topic, but I think that's what I'd say around the wobble. There's some tactical things, but fundamentally you actually need to decide, am I prepared to go through this wobble? Am I prepared to make it actually be a moment of capability building?
Right.
And not a problem.
There's several things in that I think you said that are really, really important. One is the recognition of where it is that I am adding greatest value. And how do I spend my time on that greatest value add, and not on all the operational stuff that, yes, I might do faster or better, but chews up my time and my energy and my capacity and a whole bunch of stuff. So how do I get myself focused on where I need to have that value? And I love the transparency bargain. Eyes on, hands off, because what I find is that most people, when they try to delegate, they just turn their head and hope, like, I hope it never shows up again. I hope it's okay. And, and then it comes to the deadline and it's not what they need, and there's a freak out and they step in and take over again, which does no one any good. And there is a hybrid way of staying eyes on but hands off, where you're guiding, you're checking, you're questioning, but not doing yourself. So I think that skill is a really hard one.
Yeah, and it's really a question of, if you think of it in the car, like who's in the driver's seat with the steering wheel and who's in the passenger seat, right? And actually, the leader has to change seats and actually make sure the other person feels they have the steering wheel. So hands off means I'm not touching the steering wheel. I'll give you ideas. I'll work on the organizational structure, or help repair the car if it's not going fast enough, or add more, whatever, but I'm not driving the car.
But I didn't also let you leave the parking lot and say, come back in a month and tell me that everything is okay. I've come with you on that journey.
Yeah.
And finding that balance, I think I think a lot of people struggle with that balance, especially if you have a control tendency.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So talk to me for a minute about how you recommend, I know this is in some of the former book, but this notion of understanding where I'm adding the greatest value. How do you get people to focus on that one?
Yeah. So I suppose there's a key distinction here around being an operator, or being an architect. Mm-hmm. So the operator is doing, is in the business doing the thing, and the architect is building capabilities within the business that are going to compound and accelerate. So that's the key distinction, right? So what am I doing? Am I operating the business? Am I architecting the business? Or ultimately, there's even a level further, which is like architecting the architecting, right? Am I actually getting better at getting better? Or am I helping the organization get better at getting better, which is another level. But I think as you start to move up that, your leverage will increase. However, what I would suggest is how to identify those key moments. That's where your 10x vision is really important. So when I actually work with teams or with leaders, I walk them through like a simple 5-step process around your 10x business vision. Because generally visions are too complicated. They have too many moving parts. And so it's almost impossible to achieve, because there's so many indicators to get green that you can always end up getting only half of them green, half of them yellow, a quarter are yellow and a quarter of them are red at any one time. Whereas when you really boil it down to what we really want, you've got a lot of flexibility then to pivot and to innovate, to hit the couple of key things that you really, really need. But the point of setting a really aggressive, or not even aggressive, just a bold 10x quantum leap kind of goal. It doesn't have to be about the numbers. When I say 10x, it's just that kind of quantum leap step change. But once you really get clear on what that is, then you work backwards from that. So I like to say goal is not a place, as my mentor taught me this, my goal is not a place to get to. Goal is not a place to get to, it's a place to come from. Right, and so what that means is the goal determines how you want to show up in the present. So I don't care so much really whether you get your 10x goal, or whether life happens and you find it's a different goal and you get 20x or you get 5x, or you find something else along the way. That in a sense, we will see, who knows what the market is, who knows whether customers want your product, who knows all these things, right? We'll find out. However, what the power of this is, it turns you into the person you want to be, and the person capable of creating that result. And so when you start to think, well, okay, if this is my goal, it's super, it will feel impossible, and the time frame is important, because if you put it too long, there's no pressure, but as you bring the time frame closer and closer until it feels really scary, then at that point it's like, okay, what are the power moves I need to make? Who do I need to be to hit that goal in the next year? Wow, because if I had 5 years or 10 years, I would just gradually keep doing what I'm doing and gradually increment. But now I'm being forced to step into do the scary thing, right? Go and have the conversation I wouldn't normally have, act in a way I wouldn't normally act. That starts to create the transformation in you as a leader, because the goal demands it, the mission demands it. If I'm going to be this, if I'm going to deliver this value to the world, then I have to step up. And that's when you start to see the 20% that's going to change everything.
Okay, so that reminds me very much of the other book, Making Time for Strategy, where one of my favorite quotes of yours is that you can't free your time until you know what you're freeing your time for. It's that focus on what is it that I need to be doing. Where am I going to have that big impact? Where's the 20% that's going to make all the difference that I've got to do? And I think that's the key for getting people to let go of some things and to tolerate the wobble, kind of in the know that, yes, that will build capability over the long run. Otherwise, we could talk about this around in circles, and folks don't do it, in my opinion. You got to have that vision of what I'm trying to achieve. All right. You talk about finding the 20% that moves the needle. Is there any other advice on how to figure out what that 20% is? You've talked about the vision, you've talked about the goal, you've talked about recognizing your time frame on that one. Is there any other advice on how to figure out that 20%?
Yeah, so once you've got a 10x goal that is really important to you, and I'd start there, right? It's commitment. It's the first part, a goal that you actually committed to, not just a goal that you feel you should do, but a goal you really want to do. Then you can start to work backwards and start to say, okay, what are the only couple of ways I'm really ever going to get there? In other words, if you feel you've got 100 ways to get there, or even 10 ways to get there, your goal probably isn't yet big enough.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And as you kind of bring it closer, for example, or make it bigger, then many of those things will fall away until you go, you know what, this is the bottleneck, right? Unless I address this, it's the bottleneck. And actually my goal is now so big that that the usual way of things won't work. I'll give you an example. So one of my clients was looking at his business and realized that he had clients anywhere from paying, I think the smallest client was paying him $5,000 a year. The largest client was paying him $1 million. So a huge difference. and the mean was, or at least perhaps the median was somewhere in the 10 to 20K range, I'm going to say. Right? But he had a couple of clients paying $1 million. And so he said, well, you know what? I can't remember what the total revenue of the business was. It's something say something like 10 million. But if you said, well, if we just focus on getting 100 clients who had the potential of getting $1 million spent each, that would completely, that we would 10x our business, right? By focusing on just 100 clients at $1 million. And then the question became, well, but and actually that would mean having almost fewer clients, or the same number of clients as he already had, but just a different level. But of course, right now, the sales, marketing, fulfillment, the product, they weren't designed for the $1 million client, but a couple had found the value and had come in anyway. So you can see that starting to get, what would happen if we just cut the floor off? Said, we're not going to service all of these clients, the 80% of the clients that are bringing us less than 50K, and just focus on the other ones and focus on expanding that high level. Now that's a bold move, right? It starts to feel a bit scary when you think about this. Again, that's probably a sign you're moving into the 20X the 10x, or yeah, the 20%. So because then as you do that, you're like, okay, this is now feeling scary. My old self doesn't really want to do this. My current self isn't sure they want to do this. But the 10x, for the person who already created that's probably what they did. They probably didn't think, I probably can't create a 10x business by just scaling up all these small number of clients, for example, right? I'm not sure I can go and chase 10x more clients. And if I did, to be honest, the profitability is still going to be minuscule, whereas actually if I focus on these ones, it's going to be different. So it starts to change the game, because you realize that rather than having to recruit 1,000 clients, you only have to recruit 100 clients, but things are much bigger. So long answer really to say, look for the thing that really scares you.
Okay. All right. So I have a goal. I think about reaching that goal. I think about what I could do that would help me get to that goal. And the part that really scares me is the part I want to focus on. That's likely to be the 20%. Okay.
And that's when it's reckoning, right? Because then
Right.
you're faced with the reckoning. It's like, oh, am I prepared to do the thing that scares me?
Yes.
Or, am I going to become the leader who would actually do that? Or am I going to be the leader who would not do that and would just play at the smaller game?
Play a
That's
smaller
the
game.
reckoning.
Okay. All right, I want to talk about one more concept you have in this book that I just love, joy-driven games. Explain how this fits in this whole notion of the reckoning of, am I really going to do this thing that scares me?
Yeah. So, I'll tell you a story. So, one of my business heroes, I would say, is Sir Richard Branson. And actually, I had the privilege of being able to present actually on Necker Island earlier this year, some of the to about 50 entrepreneurs, basically this book, the 10x Reckoning, and we did a workshop and we took readers through it, and it was a lot of fun. But what I love about Sir Richard is that he encapsulates this, right? He could have stopped at age 28 after Virgin Records. He made his money. He could have just retired. He could have said, "Oh, that was a grind. Never do that again. I'm going to exit my business, retire, whatever. Just dabble, be on a few boards. Just whatever. Just while away my time." But instead, he kept going for another 50 years because he protected his family. He really made time for family and kept that very safe and sacrosanct. He had a lot of fun along the way. He was always doing crazy stuff. He got 7 world records along the way. He knew how to scale himself. Like, he was always creating teams, leaving them in place to run their businesses, and then freeing himself up to do the next thing. He never got stuck in any one business. And he just kept finding new and interesting challenges. He created the Elders with Mandela and Tutu and Jimmy Carter and a whole bunch of leaders, impressive leaders around the world. He did all these philanthropy efforts. He kept finding ways to interesting, important challenges, and so he kept going. So for me, this is a great example that joy or fun is a ceiling on your ambition. Because if you go, oh, I can't go 10x, or frankly even 3x or 2x feels a bit much, because it's a bit of a grind already. So if it's a grind now, why would I want a 10x more grind? It wouldn't be. Why would you do that, right? You wouldn't. And so that's why people check out. They get to a plateau because they any more than this is going to be bad. And so I really strongly believe that if you don't do all of these things with a sense of fun and joy and being committed to your goals, and at the same time not taking yourself so seriously, which is a difficult mix perhaps sometimes to get right, but important, because on one hand you want to be fully in and like, yes, I want this, I believe in this, and the world will still revolve around its axis if we didn't do it right, and it's just worth having both of those in mind. So what I find is that most leaders are playing either what I call play to win or play not to lose,
right? And
that is based on a scarcity mindset, and often it's actually based on their identity. It's like, oh my word, like I need to be a winner, or I don't want to be a loser. I had some people at my last CEO retreat, which I held in Norway a couple of weeks ago, a month or two ago. And one of the leaders built an amazing business, 50 million scaling to 100 million, award winner in his category, amazing business. And he said to me, he said, I'm still a bit worried about, whether the business is going to survive. It's doing well, but what happens if it doesn't survive? And I asked him, what would it mean if it didn't, if it did die? It's like, well, it means that I've been a loser. And I'm like, wow. So actually, you're fighting still for your very identity. You know what I mean? Like, no wonder this business is
Yeah.
so important, because it's going to determine whether you're a winner or a loser, depending on this business. Which is like, given the fact that how many people build $100 million business revenue, right? And you know, and a much bigger valuation. Or how many people have ever done that? Hardly anybody on the planet, right? So you're already, like, by most people's reckoning, completely up there, right? And yet, if you're fighting, if that's your very identity, then you're not going to take many risks. You're going to play it safe. You're going to possibly play it so safe that you end up not making the right decisions sometimes. So when you're playing to win or playing not to lose, you're kind of always like either excited because you're ahead of the game, or worried because you're below, behind the bar. But when you start to play to play, as I call it, which is where the game starts to become fun in itself and just a game worth playing, then sure, yeah, you set goals and ideas and you go for them. If you don't get them, well, it's part of the game. But what's more important is the fact that you get to play this particular game, and therefore you get to improve your self-mastery, you get to make the contribution you can, and you keep it in its rightful place. So that's kind of how I see play to play. And I had to learn this myself. Perhaps I still learn it. Like, as a business owner, you have good quarters and less good quarters, or good years and less good years. And, you always hope it's going to be a straight line, but especially if you're playing the exponential game, it can be noisy. You could go up, go down. It could all feel very stagnant. And then suddenly you get your 10x leap. And so to hold your nerve when it's bumpy, say if it's all about who you are as a person, and if you're really playing to win or playing not to lose, then it just puts a real stress on you. Where playing to play, I think, shifts the dynamic, and joy becomes a key part of it.
Right. It's interesting how much throughout this book you have self-concept, identity wrapped through it. Am I seeing myself as somebody who's playing it safe? Do I see myself as somebody who's an operator or an architect? Do I see myself as somebody who's willing to take the risk to make a 10x or 20x or whatever? Do I see myself as somebody who's trying not to lose? How do I see myself seems to be like a central piece of evaluation in order to free people's mindset to actually go for the big thing.
Yeah, for me, it's really the key part of this book. This is because before strategy, or I say more important than strategy, or as important as strategy, is your identity, or is your leadership, and that comes out of that. So I talk about being more strategic. You need to be. Well, I say to my clients, I can help you in two main areas, right? I can help you be more strategic, and I can help you be more magnetic. And you need both of these if you're going to really achieve what you want, because the magnetism side actually means having a conviction that is deeply grounded and is going to drive you through, actually having the composure to enjoy the ride and not just be churned up by all the stresses, and it can be stressful. I've had clients who've, been ousted from their businesses by the shareholders, or by, all this stuff, right? All the loneliness of leadership, or they whatever, they get stabbed in the back by one of their henchmen, or whatever it is. All these things happen, right? And if you haven't got the composure to deal with it and keep going, you're probably never going to get to your goal. We know, we read all the stories, we know all the people who get rejection after rejection after rejection, then they get their breakthrough, or they have failed business, and then they get the kind of the unicorn. So we know this is true, but if we don't know how to deal with that, we're just likely to give up. And this is sometimes a marathon and not a sprint. So yeah, I think identity is at the core of all of this. And it feels like it's an abstract concept for people, but I found in my own life, it's like, who am I? The most obvious one is where people go from identity of being an employee to an entrepreneur, for example, right? One of my clients was a managing director at a company. He had a business unit that he'd basically built out from zero. As described in the book, he decided the only way forward for that company was if he bought it out from his own boss, basically from his own shareholders. And so we wrestled for a couple of months on this. It was like, but we've got a young family and children and a mortgage to pay. I haven't got big savings. Do I do this? But at some point he realized, oh my word, this is my reckoning. If I don't do it, I'm always going to regret it. And yeah, actually, yeah, I accept it. I am a born entrepreneur and a born leader and a born CEO, and that's what I need to do. And so he stepped into that identity. Didn't have any of the skills. How do I raise money? Where do I do that from? But he went out there. He got mentors. I supported him. He raised the money and bought out the business. And talked to one of his shareholders about 2 weeks ago, and the business that he bought out for a couple of million might well be worth 100 million in 3 years, according to his shareholder, the way it's going. So amazing outcome. But it started with identity, because he couldn't have done that from the perspective of being a high-performing employee. That's just one example, but you can see that identity is not just wishy-washy stuff. It determines who we're being and who we're acting.
I agree with you. I think this identity is at the core of pushing any of us to do more than we are currently doing. At whatever scale, whatever level in the organization, identity is at the core of it. And often identity defines what we can't do, or what we're afraid to do, or what we believe is not possible to do. And it's so buried in subtle messages, like this difference between, are you playing to play or are you playing not to lose? And it just shows up in subtle languages, but we never think to pull it out and talk about it. Or, I need to be the hero that saves everything for everybody in the organization, which means I can't let go because I've got to always be in that hero mode. I think there's a dozen ways in which our identity gets in our way. So I think this is really, and one of the things I love about the book is you have those kind of questions peppered throughout. So the reflection.
Yeah, and I often say to people, try to figure out what's the label that you stick on your forehead when you enter your work or you operate with your team. Some people are the strategic visionaries, others are the kind of the defender, defenders of truth or whatever, and or the risk averse or whatever it is, or I'm the friendly analyst, or we all have a label, which is kind of how we feel we add value to this organization. And that label, we often feel that's us, but it's not. It's just a label that we've chosen if we found it works for us. But what happens when you put that label and you just put it into your toolbox as something you can always reach into? What's the new label that you can actually own? That is a bigger, more expansive identity. So yeah, I have been the friendly, one leader, actually mid-level leader I worked with a few years ago, said, "Yeah, I think I'm their friend. I'm like this kind of compassionate, friendly leader." But I had some benefits, but also really held her back in terms of perhaps bringing challenge when it was needed and pushing the team to new heights. And so you found that if she imagined herself as, I can be friendly when I need to, that's or empathetic when I need to, that's a tool. And now my new identity, is a high performance leader. Oh, okay, well. Great. Well, sometimes a high-performance leader wants to grab that well-worn tool of being approachable and friendly, but also we need some new tools which haven't been used as much. And there's suddenly what we thought was our identity just becomes a tool, and that's a big expansion in our own capacity.
I think what you're pointing at, Richard, is something I see every single day in every client that I work with. And that is, I've been successful with this particular tool set and this particular label. I've been incredibly successful up to this point in my career. But the breakthrough to the next level, even within my organization, or the breakthrough if I'm an entrepreneur to the next level, or the breakthrough anywhere, requires abandoning what made you successful and grabbing a new label. I mean, it's the heart and soul of what I think this expert to spanning leader shift is about. But I think we see that multiple times in our lives. Am I ready to abandon what's made me successful and grab something that's going to be better?
Yeah, it happens at every level. It happens when one of my clients said, I've been a successful entrepreneur, but I now want to become a serial entrepreneur. I have a bunch of companies. That's a different identity to lean into, right? It happens at every level in the organization. You say it happens when an expert becomes a manager. It happens when a manager decides they want to become an executive, and so forth. And at each step, it is this 10x reckoning, which is, do I stay in my comfort zone with my current identity, or do I go for the thing which feels a bit impossible for me right now? Right.
Well, and that comes us full circle to what I think this book is, 10x Reckoning, is ultimately about, which is, am I enjoying what I'm doing? Or am I feeling stuck? Or is the team too slow? Am I spending too much time on operations? Like, what is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I could imagine as a future state that would make me more excited, give me more joy, have bigger impact, whatever the statement is? And then am I willing to challenge myself to play a different game, to question my assumptions, to change my label, to change my approach in order to get there? And can I tolerate some of the messiness along the way, like the wobble in the team, or shift from being in control, or deal with the transparent bargain where I'm eyes on but hands off? It's all of those things that allow me to actually get closer and closer to this huge goal that actually scares me.
Beautifully summarized.
There's much more to it. There's so many wonderful questions for reflection in this book too, Richard. Richard, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I love the passion that you bring to this. I love the imagining that we can do more than we realize. I love the quit spending our time on the things that are not really value add. And like the other book, this one is sort of solid in that. So thanks very much for being a guest. If people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Sure. So the first thing is, if you want to get your hands on some of these resources that we've talked about, so namely, actually, if you want to get a copy of the book, I'll actually put a link in. If you want to get the digital book, I'm happy to just gift anyone from this show a copy of the digital book or the audio book, as well as perhaps another great tool is the Making Time for Strategy assessment. So if you are feeling a bit overwhelmed and not sure how you're going to free yourself up to do any of this stuff, then that's a great place to start. And so again, if you just go to X Quadrant, so that's the letter X and the word quadrant, xquadrant.com / out of the comfort zone, all one word, then that will take you to those bonus resources. Otherwise, yeah, my company is called X Quadrant. You can find me on the website there, or find me on LinkedIn, and happy to engage. I also have a newsletter you can sign up for. The newsletter is quite interesting because I really encourage a dialogue with people. So if people can hit reply after any email that I send in that newsletter, I will engage with them and talk with them, because I believe that email is a conversational medium, and so often we just get blasted by emails. But so if you're interested in kind of processing a little bit about your next 10x, then perhaps get on the insider email list, which you can do.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I love it. xquadrant.com / out of the comfort zone. All sorts of tools there. Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure, again, to talk with you. And thanks for joining us this week. Join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone. Leave us a comment, too. We'd love to hear from you on any of your favorite podcast providers, or find us at outofthecomfortzone.com. See you next week.